From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radyo Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media or Voice of America on the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. left Manila Wednesday evening for a 4-day official visit to Canada, aiming to boost cooperation in trade, defense, energy, and regional security, and to encourage Ottawa to take a more active role in the Indo-Pacific. Speaking at the Villamore Air Base before his departure, the President called Canada a long-standing friend and partner, saying its support has become even more crucial as geopolitical and economic challenges continue to evolve. His trip to Vancouver from July 1 to 4 marks the first visit by a Philippine president in 10 years. President Marcos said the Philippines and Canada have built unprecedented momentum in recent years, citing progress in defense, trade, agriculture, education, and people-to-people exchanges. He also highlighted Canada's consistent backing of the Philippines' position in the West Philippine Sea, anchored on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, or UNCLOS, and the 2016 arbitral ruling. The chief executive is set to meet Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to expand cooperation in key strategic sectors, including mining and critical minerals, renewable and nuclear energy, IT/BPM, telecommunications, cybersecurity, and financial services. Both sides are expected to craft a bilateral plan of action to guide future engagements. President Marcos Jr. pointed to recent milestones in the relationship: the launch of negotiations for a bilateral free trade agreement or FTA, ongoing talks for an Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN-Canada FTA, the entry of Philippine mangoes into the Canadian market, the 2024 Defense Cooperation Memorandum of Understanding or MOU, the 2025 Status of Visiting Forces Agreement, and the inaugural Philippines-Canada Maritime Dialogue held earlier this year. The Philippine president said he will encourage Canada to take a more proactive role in the Indo-Pacific and support regional efforts to manage the impact of the crisis in the Middle East. President Marcos will also outline the Philippines' priorities as ASEAN chair, including energy and food security, maritime cooperation, and the protection of ASEAN nationals.
I depart for Canada today with the First Lady and members of the Cabinet for an official visit upon the invitation of Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada, the very first visit undertaken by a Philippine president in a decade. Established in 1949, our ties with Canada have now spanned 77 years and continues to grow from strength to strength. We have deepened engagement across a broad range of priority areas, including economic cooperation, defense and security, agriculture, and people-to-people ties. At the onset of my administration, we intensified our campaign for diversification of partnerships, strengthening existing ones and building new strategic ones. With Canada, we have seen an unprecedented momentum in the deepening of bilateral relations. It may not be known to many, but Canada has been consistent and steadfast in its statements of support for the Philippines' assertion of its sovereignty and sovereign rights, especially in the midst of the ongoing issues we are facing now in the West Philippine Sea. Canada's consistent support, both bilaterally and multilaterally, reflects our shared interest in upholding a rules-based international order, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, and the 2016 Arbitral Award. It is thus imperative that we further strengthen this connection with our long-standing friend and partner as we navigate the shared challenges that we face as Pacific nations. We have launched the negotiations for Philippines-Canada Free Trade Agreement alongside our negotiations for the ASEAN-Canada Free Trade Agreement. And the free trade agreement between the Philippines and Canada is very much in the works right now. Our mangoes have very recently entered the market of Canada. In 2024, we signed a Memorandum of Understanding on Defense Cooperation, followed by the Status of Visiting Forces Agreement in 2025. Early this year, we held our inaugural Maritime Dialogue. Our people-to-people ties were further strengthened by the launch of a non-stop Air Canada route between Vancouver and Manila last year. This development complements Philippine Airlines flight connecting Manila with Toronto and Vancouver, as well as more than 200 agreements between the educational institutions and government agencies of our two countries.
During the visit, President Marcos will meet members of the Filipino community, which he described as one of the country's strongest assets abroad. Around 1 million Filipinos live in Canada, known for their skills, professionalism, and dedication. President Marcos noted that despite being away from home, they continue to contribute to the Philippines' economic growth and democratic strength. Malacañang said Executive Secretary Ralph Recto, Agrarian Reform Secretary Conrado Estrella III, and Labor Secretary Francis Tolentino will serve as the government's caretaker committee while the President is in Canada.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. arrived in Vancouver on Wednesday, local time, for a 4-day official visit aimed at strengthening Philippine-Canada relations across trade, labor, energy, tourism, and defense. The President, accompanied by First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos, received arrival honors from Canadian officials and the Philippine diplomatic mission upon landing at Vancouver International Airport. President Marcos is set to meet Canadian Prime Minister Mark Joseph Carney for high-level discussions on expanding economic partnerships, enhancing maritime and defense cooperation, and improving support systems for overseas Filipino workers or OFWs. He will also engage Canadian business leaders in sectors such as mining, IT/BPM, telecommunications, nuclear energy, and financial services. The President will meet the Filipino community to highlight their contributions to both countries, as Canada now hosts nearly 1 million Filipinos. His visit comes as Manila and Ottawa seek deeper engagement in the Indo-Pacific and advanced negotiations for a Canada Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN Free Trade Agreement or FTA. Several bilateral agreements covering energy, natural resources, trade, labor, immigration, tourism, and culture are expected to be signed during the trip. President Marcos's visit is the first by a Philippine president since 2015, underscoring renewed momentum in ties that date back to 1949. Canada ranked as the Philippines' 16th largest trading partner in 2025, with bilateral trade reaching $3.4 billion. The two countries also strengthened defense cooperation last year through a status of visiting forces agreement.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Wednesday urged the Philippine Air Force, or PAF, to stay unwavering in its constitutional mandate, calling on airmen to uphold professionalism, discipline, and integrity amid increasingly complex security threats. Speaking at the PAF's 79th founding anniversary at Villamor Air Base, President Marcos stressed that the Air Force plays a critical role not only in national defense but also in protecting the country's democratic institutions. The President encouraged the PAF to continue upholding the highest standards of professionalism, discipline, and integrity, adding that military personnel must remain faithful to their duty to defend the Filipino people and safeguard democratic freedoms. His remarks came as thousands of Iglesia Ni Cristo or INC members continue a mass protest along EDSA, prompting heightened security and renewed public debate on governance and democratic institutions. President Marcos paid tribute to the Air Force's transformation over nearly 8 decades, describing it as a mission-oriented, capability-driven, and values-based institution. From its post-war beginnings in 1947, he said the PAF has grown into a key pillar of territorial defense, humanitarian operations, and national security. The Commander-in-Chief highlighted the service's accomplishments over the past year, noting nearly 50,000 flying hours logged across defense missions, pilot training, and unit operations and maintenance. He said the Air Force also transported millions of pounds of cargo and tens of thousands of passengers in disaster response and inter-island missions. President Marcos lauded the PAF's sustained patrols and air surveillance operations, which he said have strengthened maritime domain awareness and sovereign protection. He also underscored the importance of international defense engagements in improving interoperability and promoting regional stability. To meet evolving threats, President Marcos reaffirmed the administration's commitment to accelerating military modernization. Under the PAF modernization program, he said, the government continues to acquire helicopters, aircraft, and surveillance radar systems to boost operational capability. Equally important, he added, is investing in personnel through specialized intelligence training, advanced flight simulation programs, and joint exercises with local and foreign counterparts. President Marcos also highlighted initiatives to improve troop welfare, including mental health and well-being programs. The President reiterated his directive for the Air Force to ensure the airworthiness of all aircraft and uphold strict safety protocols, saying the lives of the men and women who serve the nation must always come first. President Marcos assured the Air Force of full government support as it confronts increasingly complex operational challenges.
As your Commander-in-Chief, I encourage you to continue upholding the highest standards of professionalism, discipline, and integrity. Above all, remain faithful to your constitutional duty to protect our people and defend the democratic institutions that safeguard our freedoms. Today, we also recognize those whose exemplary performance has brought honor to this institution. To this year's awardees, congratulations. Your achievements remind us that excellence is never achieved by chance. It is earned through consistent dedication to one's responsibilities. May your example inspire others to serve with the same sense of purpose. Let me also acknowledge the families of our military personnel. Know that your unconditional love, patience, and understanding has helped build the Philippine Air Force that our nation proudly celebrates today. As we mark this anniversary, let us remember that the strength of the Philippine Air Force rests on the character of the men and women who wear its uniform, the values that guide their service, and the trust that Filipinos have in them.
Was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Wednesday said he expects the Iglesia ni Cristo or INC's mass gathering along EDSA to remain peaceful, pointing to the religious organization's long history of orderly demonstrations. He emphasized that the government is closely monitoring the situation with public safety as its top priority. President Marcos noted that INC rallies have traditionally been conducted without violence, even with large crowds. He said the primary concern now is the possibility of outside groups attempting to infiltrate the gathering and provoke unrest. The president stressed that preventing injuries and ensuring the safety of both participants and bystanders remains the government's foremost objective. The president thanked INC organizers, law enforcement agencies, and rally participants for maintaining order and stability throughout the demonstration. President Marcos also rejected allegations raised during the protest that his administration is practicing selective justice. He dismissed claims that the government targets political opponents while protecting allies, saying such accusations do not reflect how cases are handled. Thousands of INC members have continued to gather along portions of EDSA since Tuesday, expressing support for Senator Rodante Marcoleta and criticizing what they describe as political persecution. The rally comes amid reports that the Office of the Ombudsman is preparing charges against Marcoleta over alleged irregularities involving 75 million pesos in campaign contributions that were not properly declared in his financial disclosures. The senator has denied any wrongdoing and has linked the case to his efforts to expose alleged anomalies in government flood control projects. Malacañang has repeatedly refuted accusations of selective justice, maintaining that legal actions are based on evidence and are pursued by the Office of the Ombudsman, an independent constitutional body. Authorities have deployed thousands of police personnel to secure the rally site and manage traffic along major roads in Metro Manila.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Malacañang on Wednesday called on the leadership of the Iglesia ni Cristo or INC to remain vigilant against groups that may attempt to use the religious organization's ongoing protest along EDSA to destabilize the government. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said authorities are taking seriously circulating reports on social media about supposed plans to storm government institutions, including Malacañang Palace, even as officials have yet to verify the information. She emphasized that the administration does not believe INC members are involved in any destabilization efforts, noting the palace's respect for the group's leadership and integrity. Castro appealed to INC leaders to exercise caution, warning that other groups seeking to remove President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. from office may try to infiltrate or exploit the protest. She said the government is prepared to counter any attempt to undermine the administration, whether the reports are rumors or intimidation tactics. The palace also acknowledged INC's call for transparency and accountability as members rallied in support of Senator Rodante Marcoleta. The protest followed the Office of the Ombudsman's recommendation to file a plunder complaint against the senator over alleged undeclared 75 million pesos in campaign donations. Marcoleta has denied the allegations and linked the case to his exposés on alleged irregularities in flood control projects. Castro said the president shares the goal of strengthening transparency in government and assured the public that the administration respects the right to peaceful assembly. She reminded protesters to comply with the law and avoid provoking police officers, noting that the Philippine National Police is enforcing maximum tolerance. Thousands of INC members have continued to gather along portions of EDSA since Tuesday, while authorities have deployed additional police personnel to secure the area and manage traffic along major Metro Manila thoroughfares.
Ito po'y nakarating na. At kung ito man ay isang chismis, isang pananakot, hindi naman po ito isa sa baliwala lamang ng mga otoridad natin. Pero ang tanong, sino ba yung lulusob? Sino sa mga nagpoprotesta? Hindi naman po siguro. At ayokong paniwalaan, ayaw naming paniwalaan na ang miyembro ng INC, no? Hindi namin paniniwalaan na miyembro ng INC ang siyang gagawa nito. Dahil sabi nga natin, ginagalang natin ang integridad, ang liderato ng INC. Hindi naman siguro ang purpose ng kanilang protesta ay mag-destabilize. Ang pakiusap po natin sa liderato ng INC, maging maingat din po sila at baka sila ay magamit ng ibang mga tao na ang naisin ay patalsikin ang Pangulo. Dahil alam natin ang INC ay hindi yan ang hinihimok sa taong bayan. But matagal naman na po na may nagnanais patalsikin ang Pangulo sa gobyerno, sa posisyon. So, hindi ito bago. So, handa naman po ang gobyerno para dyan.
Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Wednesday, Malacañang said Senator Amy Marcos's latest criticisms of the administration appear aligned with a broader push to remove President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. from office and elevate her political ally, Vice President Sara Duterte. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro told reporters that the senator's remarks during a rally in Quezon City were clearly intended to discredit the administration and inflame public anger. She described the attacks as deliberate attempts to undermine the president, characterizing them as misinformation designed to sow resentment. Castro dismissed the allegations raised by the senator as baseless, saying the criticisms ignore established facts and appear aimed at weakening the government. She noted that the senator has long been associated with groups seeking to unseat the president and suggested her statements were consistent with those efforts. Castro also questioned the timing of the senator's comments, pointing out that she remained silent when former President Rodrigo Duterte publicly admitted to using illegal drugs. She said the president has been informed of his sister's remarks but will not direct any investigation, emphasizing that any probe would fall under the jurisdiction of the appropriate authorities. The senator's comments were delivered during a surprise rally by Iglesia ni Cristo or INC members at the EDSA People Power Monument, where she accused the government of neglecting ordinary Filipinos and prioritizing foreign engagements over domestic concerns. Malacañang reiterated that accountability processes remain with independent bodies and stressed that the administration continues to focus on governance and public service despite political attacks.
Hindi lang ito pagkakalat ng fake news, paghahasik nga ng puot sa ating mga kababayan. At ano ba ang nais nilang mangyari? Noon pa naman niya nais umalis sa posisyon ang Pangulo para For what? Para iluklok ang kanyang kaibigan, ang Vice Presidente. Hindi lang ito simpleng paninira, hindi ito simpleng pagbibigay at pagkakalat ng fake news. Paghahasik ito ng puot. Hindi mag-uutos ang Pangulo na imbestigahan ng kanyang kapatid. Nasa authority yan. Nasa authority na yan kung kinakailangang imbestigahan si Senator Amy Marcos. Hindi po tayo mag-uutos. Obligasyon po nila mag-imbestiga.
Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang said Wednesday that President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is reviewing a recommendation to extend the government's 50 pesos per kilo suggested retail price or SRP on imported rice, which is set to expire soon. The proposal, endorsed by the National Price Coordinating Council, aims to keep rice prices stable amid global market volatility and persistent geopolitical tensions. The Department of Agriculture, or DA, earlier pushed for a 60-day extension of the price cap for 5% broken imported rice to sustain gains in moderating rice inflation. The cap was first imposed in May following sharp price increases linked to supply concerns and disruptions caused by the conflict in the Middle East. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the president is considering the timing of the upcoming September harvest as he evaluates the recommendation. She added that the administration is preparing additional measures to manage food prices as inflationary pressures are expected to intensify in the second half of the year. President Marcos has directed the Agriculture Department to secure adequate fertilizer supplies amid rising global demand, noting that lower production costs during planting season will help reduce palay prices at harvest. The government is also expanding investments in post-harvest facilities and cold storage infrastructure to reduce food losses and improve supply chain efficiency.
According to DA, the NPCC or National Price Coordinating Council ay nagrekomenda na po ng extension para sa price cap. Hanggang ngayon po ay inaaral pa po ito ng Pangulo para sa kanyang approval dahil tinitignan ang malapit na anihan sa September, kaya kinukonsidera rin po ito ng Pangulo. Actually, nung nagkaroon po ng pagbisita sa bansang Russia, mariin po na iniutos talaga po ng Pangulo sa ahensya, sa DA, na hindi po tayo dapat mawala ng supply ng fertilizers. Although, tumataas ang presyo nito because of the global oil crisis. Pero ang sabi po ng Pangulo, ang utos ay hindi po dapat mawalan ng fertilizers para sa ating mga magsasaka. At sa kasalukuyan po, ang gobyerno po ay namimigay ng mga abono at pataba sa ating mga magsasaka dahil planting season na. So mas mababa ang cost production nila, which will mean lower po ang cost ng palay once harvest season. So matutuloy rin po ang paggawa ng mga post-harvest facilities and cold storages na makakapagpababa ng food waste natin.
Was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippine government on Wednesday formally launched the development of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, or NACS, a comprehensive framework designed to tighten coordination, prevention, and enforcement of anti-corruption policies across all agencies. The initiative comes 2 decades after the Philippines ratified the United Nations Convention on Corruption. Deputy Executive Secretary for Legal Affairs, Jesse Hermogenes Andres, said the strategy will be anchored on integrity, accountability, and transparency. He noted that the UN Convention outlines 5 pillars the Philippines will follow: preventive measures, criminalization and law enforcement, technical assistance and information sharing, international cooperation, and asset recovery. The strategy will be crafted through an inclusive process involving national government agencies, civil society groups, the private sector, and the academe. A series of focus group discussions and a multi-stakeholder summit will gather inputs, with the University of the Philippines National College of Public Administration and Governance serving as a key partner. Officials said the initiative supports the country's commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly efforts to build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions.
We mark the commencement of the formulation of a comprehensive national framework aimed at strengthening integrity, accountability, and transparency across all sectors. The NAC seeks to harmonize existing efforts, reinforce institutional safeguards, and promote what we call a whole-of-nation approach in advancing good governance. Headed by our Presidential UNCAC Interagency Committee, or the PUICOM, which is composed of the Office of the President through the Executive Secretary, the Department of Justice, the Department of Interior and Local Government, the DepDev, the Department of Management, and the Department of Foreign Affairs. This committee brings together representatives from government, civil society, the academe, and development partners to affirm our commitment against all forms of corruption.
Deputy Executive Secretary for Legal Affairs, Jesse Hermogenes Andres.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news, the Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, working with the Philippine National Police Criminal Investigation and Detection Group, or PNP-CIDG, has closed a consultancy firm in Santa Ana, Manila, and arrested 2 individuals accused of running an illegal recruitment scheme offering fraudulent jobs in Poland. The enforcement operation, led by Migrant Workers Secretary Leo Magpayo and senior officials of the Migrant Workers Protection Bureau, was carried out under Closure Order No. 24, Series of 2026, against Venancia Consultancy Pty Limited and Venancia International Manpower Incorporated. Authorities arrested Jomalyn Baya Fisher and Glidel Sayon and identified 2 others, Rina Songahid Bench and Arlene Rodriguez, as alleged accomplices. Investigators said the group falsely claimed they were authorized to deploy workers to Poland for welding and factory jobs, charging applicants 300,000 pesos in processing fees and promising salaries of 1,200 euros a month. DMW verification showed that while 2 of the suspects were recruitment officers of a licensed agency, they had no connection to Venancia, and the agency they claimed to represent had no approved job orders for Poland. The job offers were deemed illegal, and the suspects now face charges and will be added to the DMW's list of persons with derogatory records. The DMW will also recommend the cancellation of Venancia's business permit and its registration with the Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI. Officials urged other victims to come forward and seek free legal assistance through the Migrant Workers Protection Bureau. The department reminded aspiring OFWs to verify an agency's license and approve job orders before paying any fees or accepting overseas employment offers.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, The Philippines has officially moved up to Upper Middle Income Country or UMIC status after posting a record gross national income or GNI per capita of $4,850 in 2025, ending decades of being classified as a lower middle income economy. The World Bank announced that the country is now part of a group of new UMICs that includes Jordan, Micronesia, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. World Bank data show the Philippines' GNI climbed to $566.8 billion in 2025, driven by broad-based economic expansion and an average gross domestic product or GDP growth of 5.8% over the past 5 years. But despite the milestone, Vietnam outpaced the Philippines, raising its GNI per capita to $4,970 and widening the income gap sixfold in just a year. Vietnam's export-powered economy posted some of the region's strongest sustained growth, with GDP rising 7 to 8% in 2024 and 2025. The Philippines' slower performance followed last year's post-pandemic GDP dip to 4.4%, weighed down by the multi-billion peso flood control corruption scandal that dampened consumption and investor confidence. Other newly reclassified UMICs include Jordan at $5,260, Micronesia at $4,760, and Sri Lanka at $4,670. Meanwhile, Togo moved up to lower middle income status. With its new UMIC standing, the Philippines is expected to gradually lose access to the most concessional loans from development partners such as the World Bank, Asian Development Bank or ADB, and China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank or AIIB. The achievement fulfills a long-delayed national goal first targeted under the Duterte administration and later reset by President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. after pandemic-era setbacks.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.